Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Wolfram language design review, part of our incremental language development series. Our first topic, a big one, not about forestry, is logging.
Yeah.
So,
So we have, over the past handful of ILD meetings, been kind of specking out a general design for a explicit logging framework. I've sort of taken those notes, started implementing them, and then kind of tried to create a general framework as I've been doing that and seeing, what the functionality gaps are. So the main idea is that logged is a wrapper for an evaluation. If you aren't inside a logging block, it basically just returns identity. And with logging is an activation wrapper. So it says any logged expressions inside of it will fire and log as well as returning their input
does
or
logged
returning their
itself
output.
have a second argument that sort of allows you to annotate this particular log, much like echo function and things?
Yeah, so that's one question that we'll get into
Okay,
a
all right,
little
fine.
farther down. But yeah, so one thing I immediately kind of ran into is that logging is a side effect heavy operation. There are going to be different kinds of logging targets we want, and to
Hmm.
kind of containerize all of that, I created this log object container, which basically lets you, if there's no arguments provided, it generates this generic log object, which logs to an expression in the session, but you can look at other log objects later on, but you can provide it as a second argument to with logging, and it will log whatever evaluations
To that
are
log object.
to
So it's
that
a
log
mutable
object.
thing.
Yep. Yep. And so this is sort of the basic flow here is that we then have a semantically meaningful object that isn't just this is a file. We know it is a log object. It may have a file on the back end. It may have a cloud
Yeah, I like the
object.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of a preliminary implementation that as I've come across things, I've tried to kind of come up with solutions, and it's baked enough that I think getting some feedback would be good to see if that's the direction we want to go in,
Okay,
and then I
let's
can
take a
talk
look. I'm
shop a little
liking
more.
this, what you're telling me so far.
Yep.
Um, so it's a little bit like a data bin.
Yeah.
This thing is a
Mhm.
like, and should it have sort of a create type mechanism here?
So if you evaluate that first that first input there, LO equals log object, that is the creation operation right now. If you open the summary box, you'll see that that's a log object. It's pointing to a bag right now, just as a structure. And the last time it updated, it says infinite pass there, but it just hasn't. No, there haven't been anything logged to it yet. I think the idea of explicitly creating it can be useful, but there's going to be lots of different potential containers. We may want to point to a data bin
Okay,
or
fine.
to a fixed cloud object.
By the way, why isn't that a data structure? That might
It
be
will
very
be a data
useful.
structure. Just this for initial prototyping, it was
Okay,
easy
fine.
enough to just have a bag that we stuff expressions into.
Why isn't
Uh,
that just a data structure of bag? But
it could
why
be a
don't,
data structure with bag. Yeah, this was
but,
just a.
but why don't we take our internal bag thing and just make that a data structure if we don't already have a data structure which is a bag? I mean, in other words, the
We
thing that we
probably have
oh,
a data structure that is just a bag.
Yeah, I think
There
we
may be subtle
do.
differences between the internal
well,
bag.
maybe we should figure that out. Could
Mhm.
you figure that out? That would
Yep.
be
Yeah,
useful.
I'll follow up on that.
Okay. Um, okay.
And so if you evaluate that with logging evaluation, there's two logged expressions in there. You can then, if you inspect the log object again, you'll see that it has a last update. Uh,
Why do I have to do read list? That seems like a
well,
horrible
read
thing.
list is just one example of accessing the data from it. There's other examples
I
farther
don't think
down.
that's the right thing to think about. I mean, read list is a very much a file-like
Yeah, it
operation.
is a very file operated system. The idea with having it be more read list oriented is that the structure here is going to be we want it to be insertion friendly, or I guess append friendly.
Yeah. But isn't that
Um,
exactly like a data bin? Can't we use a bunch of
it
things
is
around
like a
here?
data bin. Yeah. I mean,
Maybe we should just use the data.
Yeah, I guess I didn't notice this earlier. So you're calling read list on a log object. So you're using some up value on read list,
Yeah,
or
so this is for symmetry right now. I mean, the idea, so you could also, if you say, tabular of the log object, it will give you a tabular that has all of the data,
yeah,
or
but
event series.
read list doesn't transform things, right? It opens streams.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's just the
So
wrong thing. I mean,
this is this looks completely wrong.
yeah. I mean,
Values.
minor wrong thing.
yeah. Values would probably be a better.
Values makes a lot of sense to me. Minor glitch there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a.
But this is nice.
Yep. Or event series will do the same thing. It just doesn't going to have as nice of a,
Right.
a
And
visual
by the way,
interface.
we should make that work with data bins. Tabular of a data bin should work. I don't know if it does. Does it?
I don't.
Is it
No.
always obvious that a data bin is what the corresponding tabular structure is?
I think so. Because it's basically an event series.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, I
geared
think
towards key values, but it
Mhm.
can take any arbitrary expression. So
Right, but it always has a timestamp.
yeah, right. So yeah, there's some thinking to be done about if it is key values, do you put the timestamp at the same level as the keys, or is it sort of separate?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So one thing I immediately noticed is that with logging is returning the evaluation, and so you don't necessarily see the log object. I added this temporary option to
Yeah.
say return log object
Well, I mean, this
true.
is like reap and sow and things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you want to be able to. I mean, I think that, how would we do this? Okay, first point.
I mean, why
ahead.
do we want to return the log object when it's an input? I mean, you know where you're logging.
Yeah.
Okay, first point is that with logging, presumably has you should be able to say with logging of a log object there, and then the expression, right?
Yeah, that isn't hooked up, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I do currently allow you to specify with logging without giving a target log object, and it will generate one for you. But
Good.
if you're not spitting it back out, that's a little confusing.
In which case, I think
It has to be one or the other,
adding an
right?
operating form is a mistake.
What's that?
In which case, I think adding an operator form is a mistake.
Well, I think we really want an operator form, because if you just think you've got this big long thing and you've got to say / with logging blah, right? Then the question is, if it was an anonymous with logging, where the heck does it go, and how do you find it?
If you look at log objects, sort of as an analog
Yeah, that's
of
pretty horrible.
it is kind of horrible.
It's like the
Yeah,
Matrix, where you're trying to fish it. The movie The Matrix, where you're trying
yeah,
to
and
fish
it
the thing out
only
of-
keeps track of the things that are there in the session.
I like
yeah.
the operator form. I use echo label a lot more than echo.
Mhm. Yeah, I think operator form makes a lot of sense. Initially what I had tried to do is have all these parameters be things that were inside the logged wrapper themselves rather than with logging, but then you have to deal with if you change where you want to log it, it gets more complicated.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I think
Right. So
having
now
the log
what we have
object-
to do is to solve what where does the log go? I noticed Dan on our live stream is asking, does this framework support logging levels like debug, warning, error, etc.?
Yep. So that's one of the questions for a little farther down. Right now this doesn't include logging levels, but that's a common feature that application logs have.
But I still want to know, if you do this anonymous with logging, how do you find where the log is?
Yep. And so I think the two options are either we have some lookup mechanism, which is clunky, or we return it as part of the result.
Okay, I've got a different suggestion. My suggestion is we have that replicating, if we can invent a function where this is, I don't know what the right name for it is, but where it does more like a reap type operation, so that some version of this, I mean, this is horrible and not the right name, but this thing would return, like timing returns, which order is it? My God, I should know this. What order is it?
Timing gives the timing first and then the result. Yeah.
Okay. So then this would give the log object and then the expression.
Arguably, with logging, could just do that.
No, it can't.
No, because we don't
Well,
want that.
oh, you always do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the form I have with this return log object option changes the results to basically always be in that form, which feels redundant if you're specifying an input log. But yeah,
look,
if we
I
have
think we need two different functions. I think we need one that is sort of silent logging that just goes off and does it independently, silent logging of the log file and expo, and then another one which is sort of with logging where it explicitly returns the log object.
Well, why isn't there just a, dollar default log object, which, the first time in a session that you have an anonymous thingy, it's initializes to some value and then it's used for the rest of the session.
Well, that's the question is that what you're going to want of just saying,
well, I guess what's the current behavior that every time you call with log, you get a different log object?
No, right now. So it basically what we do is we hash the parameters to say, if I say log object without any arguments, or I'm logging to an expression, here's the default one that it will point to. You can target a specific,
which is exactly what Itai is saying here.
Yeah.
To have a dollar default log object.
Yeah, there just isn't such a symbol right now, but there certainly could be.
Okay, so let's walk through Itai's proposal here. So Itai's proposal is, unless you give an explicit log object here, and it's not obvious we want to make use of, that for the session. Look, you could always say something like, it's not quite this, but that would, I don't know how you do this. We could have a dollar session log objects that gives the sequence of log objects created in that session.
Which is what in the current version, if you do log objects open close, will give you that list. But yeah.
Okay.
Which is, I think, the more consistent thing to do, right? We have links, we have
cloud objects, etc.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So then,
right, but I'm still very confused because so you can create your own log object, but where do things go when you
just say with logging I haven't created one.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, well, if you do with log, in this theoretical with logging of bracket of expr, where does that get logged?
The dollar default log object.
Okay, well, that is my proposal, right? In which case, like, what's the issue?
Well, I think the issue is, how common is it going to be to want to how common is it going to be that you basically just have some big piece of code and you just want to log it once? I think that's going to be fairly common. Right? You don't want to get the whole session's worth of logs. You might want to get the whole session's worth of logs if you didn't expect something to go wrong and something goes wrong.
I don't understand that statement at all.
Okay, so I'm saying the very common thing is you put logged in your code, okay?
Fine.
And then you want to run a particular, evaluation with logging.
Yep.
Okay? Arguably, if you want to do that, why the heck don't you?
Do you want any permanence to that? Because normally logging to me suggests, some sort of permanence. And I guess, does the log object actually store the all the values. It's an interpretable thingamabob.
Yes, I think so.
Yep.
I mean,
Right.
so one argument is if you say with logging, that means you actually want the logging right there. There's another possibility, which is that throughout your session, you just want to put logged all over the place, and you just want to store a big default log for your whole session.
But no, log doesn't do anything unless it's inside of a with logging.
Well, I understand, but you could have a thing where you sort of
Right.
automatically do that in the main loop, right? That every input output,
If
every
if there's
input,
a dollar default log object, I don't see why not.
right? That then all the logs, log to the default log object.
I see. And with logging is an explicit call to log somewhere else and give me the resulting log object.
Right. But now it's a bit redundant if you say that would be an anonymous log object, right? Where you're not naming
Mhm.
it, as opposed to with logging where you it's almost like an append to log of log object expa is a different thing. In other words, one thing is you do a single evaluation and it could be nested and you just want the logging from that evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Making sense? The other
Yeah.
thing is you've got a global log and you want this evaluation to add to that global log. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If with loggings are nested, does it log to all of the log objects?
Yes.
Yeah.
But so what we need is something that distinguishes between these two cases, a local with logging where you're going to return the log object and a thing where it's add to an existing log object. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm confused because it sounded to me like you were suggesting that logged on its own should be doing logging.
No, I'm suggesting that there are three ways to get logging to happen.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know why I'm typing this, but anyway. Okay, so way number one is with logging of expa, which could have other arguments, but that would return, log object and expa, whatever expa is. Okay. Second way of doing it would be this append to log, not a good name, where you have to give the log object and then you give the expression, right? And the third case is $default log object. It's probably $default logging object or something, which would just log everything to a certain logging object.
Well, with logging you mean by everything you mean
Everything that's in a
expressions
log.
wrapped in logged.
Right. Right. That's what I mean.
And right, so you're suggesting that with logging will create a new log object
That's
for
what I'm
every.
suggesting. Yes.
Okay.
That everything within it is local logging.
So with logging is not checking dollar default logging
No,
object.
it has nothing to do with $default logging. It's making its own log object.
Okay.
In which case, I'm not sure that default is the right thing, right? It should be like
Session logging object.
session or global or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. And we could have some setting somewhere if you wanted to turn off session logging, automatic session logging or something.
Well, session logging object would be none by default.
Mm,
And if
I see. So you say session logging object is blah, and then
in principle, it could be objects. We could be logging. I'm not sure I particularly like this assigning things to get that to happen. But the basic point is you can have something which by default in the main loop just logs everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of think that the right way to do this would be to say, start global logging. I mean, that could return a log object.
Yeah, or you could
Yeah.
set, if you provide a log object as argument, you're saying target this one.
Right.
Yeah, that's a more
Logging
active
begin.
opt-in.
And obviously then you'd need an end or
Yeah.
stop or
Yeah.
And if you do start logging twice, it returns the same log object, right?
actually I think it should be begin logging and end logging.
I
Yes.
agree
It's
with you.
consistent with package structure, yeah.
Yep.
If you do it twice, it gives the same log object. It works as like a recovery
Yeah, unless you
mechanism.
specify a different one, and then you can.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's right, as opposed to just giving another logging object. I think you want a different
or
logging
a
object.
failure.
I think you wanted. Look, begin logging just creates a log object that's now being logged to,
Mm,
and you could have as many as you want. I mean, because you might have something where you have a global log, and then you're doing something special, and you want to get that particular log for the special stuff you did, but you still want the global log as a safety net for your whole session.
so you could scope the logs effectively.
Yeah, we now
Okay.
need a stack of or
So then
list
to
of
recover it,
logs.
you'd go to $session logging objects.
Yes, but here end logging could take a log object. It could either be, the most
Mm.
recent log object, or it could be a specific log object.
Or all, and logging of all.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
I like start logging and end logging. I think that's a good idea. Begin logging and end logging. Do we need dollar? Well,
You need a way to find the log objects you've created.
Yes, you're right.
None. I will point out that none of our sort of begin end things, like none of our end things take things, right? Like end package.
Yeah, they're all just stacked.
They're all just stacked. So this would be a little weird for this to take.
Well, then maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe it literally is stacked. And then if you really want to be more specific about it, you go into the log objects. Now, once you have those log objects, there's a question of a log object that's active, as in actively being logged to,
Mhm.
versus a log object that's just sitting there. And there should probably be some way, there should be a sub-value to the log object for whether it is actively being logged to. Because if it's in a begin logging, when you look at log objects, you should be able to tell which ones are actively being logged to.
Yeah, we could have a status field if it's inside an active logging trigger or not.
Right. Okay. So
Because you
we've
can
got
always
one more name
reactivate
here.
one too.
We've got this is great. These two
Mhm.
end ones. Now, what about this one here, where you have an existing logging object and you want to append?
I was thinking log2 even. Log to log object. Expert.
Logging to.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Log
I'm
two
sure
feels
Why
like
not
a
just a second
logarithm
argument to logged?
because you don't want to spray that all over the place when you use logged. I'm not even sure that this case will be that common.
I'm sorry, what is this logging to
Okay,
upload?
what that does is, with logging, will return the log object.
Mhm.
This will simply return expr.
Well, it's more, the comparison is with logged. It's like logged, but you specify a log object. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as logged.
Sorry, I didn't understand that.
Logged of expr returns expr and logs it. Logging to of log object also just returns expr and logs it. The only difference between logged and logging to of a log object is that the latter is specifying a log object.
Well, you presumably could specify a log object in logged. But are you saying that
It's like the relation between echo and echo function.
But
I guess I was thinking of
But
logging
echo still
to.
has that second argument.
does that make sense? I mean, like, is that like an additional log? Is that overriding what you log to? I mean, that's really ambiguous. This logged with a log object inside of it.
yes?
Yeah, I mean, I think having a single wrapper that indicates what is to be logged is useful. I was thinking of logging to as a parallel function to with logging rather than a parallel wrapper to logged.
Yes, I agree. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Right.
It's an
with
activation
logging,
wrapper that needs to be sub-value held because
the question
Right.
is it useful to go to a name with logging will create a new log object every time you call it. Okay.
yes.
Logging to will allow you to append to an existing log object.
Right. Isn't this what we were calling, yes, append to log or write to log just a few minutes ago?
Yes, it is.
Yes, we were looking at alternative names since we
I
didn't
see.
love append to log.
Okay.
Well, initially logged didn't log unless it was inside the with logging wrapper.
Yeah.
And we're
And
going
it
a different
still
direction
won't
than
unless
that.
you're inside a begin logging.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Or inside of this thing.
Or inside of that thing. Yep.
And after a begin logging has been evaluated.
Right.
Yep.
No longer has to be within a with logging.
I mean, it would be slightly unusual, but if we have a with logging, then I would think this should be with logging too. I mean, it's a little weird because most of our blank two things are, L value mutators.
Yeah. Look, here's another possibility that with logging could take a log object and it just happens to return it as well. And you throw it away if you don't want it. In other words, rather than having it be a silent, I mean,
it's optional, and if it's not provided, it gets created.
Exactly.
But you
if it
always
is provided,
return
you get
the
the thing
log
echoed back.
that was used.
I mean, the other thing is the question is, are we going to want to use these things? Look, if with logging, it might be really inconvenient to have the with logging thing there because you might want to say percent. You don't want to get, the extra crud in there and so on. On the other hand, I think this may not be necessary. This thing here may not be necessary. It may be that you either use begin logging, end logging, or you just use with logging locally. All right, let's keep going. I think we know we want with logging and begin logging. Whether we want this intermediate thing, we don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean,
And are we keeping the dollar session logs?
No, we're keeping log objects.
Log objects. Okay.
Okay.
So my mental model is that
so what's in log objects?
Every active, that will be the things for which begin logging has been activated. Or if you were to call log objects within a with logging, it would show the log object that is currently active.
That was gonna be my mental model is that with logging temporarily appends log objects.
Yep.
Okay. Right.
I thought it was all known log objects, whether inactive or not.
Actually, it could be because you might have a log that you made a while ago.
Yeah, we could have classes like we do with cloud objects where there's named objects and anonymous. We could have active and dormant.
Right. Because the thing we don't have right now, other than possibly something like log objects of active equals, not equal to or not same queue empty list. Right. We don't have a way of saying is logging currently active or not, which is something.
We will need that. I mean, I think $logging or something. I see.
Yeah, like dollar message list or something.
Well, it's not right.
Yeah,
This is
it's
not
not
Mitch's list. This is
yeah.
it's the thing we actually don't have for messages, right? Right.
Yeah.
Really, this is current log objects, which is the log objects as opposed to
Yes.
all log objects.
Mhm.
Current log objects means the ones to which it is currently being logged.
I mean, could log objects just have a string value, like active? Gives you the active
Yeah,
one.
that's what I was saying. So we could have classes or
Yeah.
status.
Automatic wouldn't be crazy
For
for the things that are automatically being logged to.
oh, I see. Well,
Log objects
I
that are
kind of think
automatic.
we might find these useful. So Dan, our live stream, is asking, is echo a special case of log that prints instead of storing?
Well,
There's
Rather,
some similarity.
not really, right? Echo is an active thing. It's not a designation. And it's not, I mean, I guess we have like echo label and whatnot, but right, there's not a whole lot of metadata there.
The thing we still haven't dealt with properly for echo is this business about you echo for a while and then you clean it up after you finish that input-output pair.
Yeah, echo temporary.
Right, which we need to work out. Okay, let's
So we kind of looked at this, but just these are just some hooks of natural, might want to call
so
data
we just
set.
want values instead of that.
Yeah, values instead of that makes sense.
And then it's exactly the same as data bins, I believe.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
Check
Yeah.
this
The
same
tabular
thing.
doesn't work for data bins yet, but it should.
Right. Okay. Logging targets.
So these are just a handful of other, I've got these are the icons here are
Cannot
temporary,
use a
but
floppy disk,
I know these are placeholders. But the idea is,
That is still the save to disk file, right? Icon. I mean, as anachronistic as it is.
Why can't you log to a floppy disk?
yeah,
You have a
but
floppy
the
disk reader. do
I
have
was
one.
I was looking at the Urbana Libraries, tools checkout thing, and one of the things they have is a USB 3.5-inch floppy drive.
interesting.
Okay. In any case,
So this creates a log object that writes. So whenever a log action is performed right now, because that method synchronous I'll talk about in a little bit, means that whenever a log event is active, it will write and append to that file. Since I didn't specify what the target file is, it's just creating a temporary file, which is what that logging target there is. But you can see, the examples there are just, you can run a do loop of logging random reals. They get put into the log object and they also get written into the file.
we should make sure several things we should make sure about.
Mhm.
One is, in the event of crashes, we should make sure that there's something that is logging that can log even when the thing crashes. It's
Yep.
one thing. Another thing is that in remote batch submit, we should make sure that that works with this somehow appropriately. That there's logging that can enmesh properly. That if you've done a remote batch submit and you look at the remote batch object, that somehow it has logging that that you can pick up this kind of logging from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is sort of specifying our explicit logging framework, and then there's going to be a parallel project that is adding automatic logging to various things in the system that will piggyback.
Okay.
This version, we're working on tying into the same logging framework that the front end uses, for example. And so, like writing this out, you're going to also want to have options of what log format you're using, what the dates are written out as. Right now, it's writing them out as expressions because this is just creating a temporary file. But you may want to target, a log4j file or a
Apache log or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but I don't quite understand how you're. So what would you do here? You'd say this is not really a with logging play. This is really a begin logging play. Or
Yeah, this is a begin logging play where you're basically saying, the option here if target structure goes to file is just to indicate that I want this log to be file backed and not just a session log.
Right, and not just to be something like with logging, where you're returning a symbolic object,
Yep,
which you could then push out to one of these logs.
exactly. Yeah, the log objects themselves should be exportable, but this is saying log synchronously when log events are encountered.
Right, but that's a
This
creature of begin logging, presumably.
Yeah, it could be for begin logging or potentially for with logging also.
Well, how?
so
Okay,
sorry, how is this begin logging? Isn't this just creating a log object?
it is, which you then have to feed in. But what we've been discussing for with logging, I mean, I guess the point is, if you say with logging and you give it a file back log object, then the thing it returns, which is the same thing again, is just the pointer to the file. It's not the content of the file.
Right.
I suppose what we could return for that log object, if you say make the persistence, thing be a file, the log object could return one of those little rafts underneath that says, this is not stored. Do you want to store it?
I say like the notebook contents. Yeah.
Well, like we do with videos and things like this. I mean, that seems like a civilized way to do it. You thought you were storing it in a file, but actually you realize it's quite a small log and you just want to put it in the notebook.
Yeah, I can see that.
How does this relate to persistence locations?
I mean, that would be a natural kind of tie-in, the back end here. So this example with cloud objects kind of touches on another an issue we can talk about in a little more detail. But you can see the timing on that first one is pretty bad because every time the logged evaluation's encountered, it's pushing something to the cloud.
Yeah.
And so what I have added right now is another method called queuing, where basically within the with logging structure, it is generating an internal. Right now it's using a bag, but it's basically pushing all of the logs to a data structure. And then at the end, it does a cleanup routine where it pushes everything at once.
How are we doing this for data bins?
Right, and
Each
then
request happens when it
What's
happens.
that? Say it again. What?
There's no sort of queue like that, right? When you say data bin add, it does it synchronously.
And you can have lots of them that are pushed and they just queue up to get actually added to the data bin. Is that correct?
Right.
and
But the client, if you're, the client will hold for each one,
It blocks, you mean, before each one
Yes.
goes in?
Yes.
right, it's all in the main loop is what I think he's telling us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for methods here, there's various options we want to go with.
We have a data bin submit as well that returns a task object.
Right, and
for
of
queuing.
course, now that we have begin logging and end logging, then what does method goes to queue? Or does now every single in out have to, go talk to the cloud, which,
Yeah. I mean, so
that
that
doesn't seem like a performant option. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different versions too, because you may want to partially queue but not wait for everything. If I'm trying to log and debug a crash, I may not want to have every evaluation push out to a file. I may want to have a small stack. I may basically want to auto batch, or I may want to run things asynchronously. And that's where I think the method lets us separate the logging method and piling system from the backend structure. I might want to write. Might have an external hard. I might literally be writing to a floppy disk, and I want to make as few writes as possible, stack them up into batches, and push them out.
Is this another like per log object property, like whether it's active or not?
That's how I have it set up now.
How does this really relate to the persistence locations? Because I think it should just basically use persistence locations. Because we must have a mechanism for writing to persistence locations that is the direct analog of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think target
Well, not really, because with persistence locations, you manually write things to them and then they stick there, right? Persistence location is basically non-volatile RAM, right? You have a super slow writing operation and then you access it a bunch of time.
I see, but there's okay. Let's keep going. I'm not. We should come back to this. I think,
And really you mean persistent object, right? Not persistence
yes,
location.
I do
Yes.
mean persistent object.
Is that, I mean, is that some different framework?
No, same framework. Just
Okay,
persistence location is like the cloud. Persistence object is like a cloud object.
But
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying this thing, instead of being target structure, should be persistence location.
Yeah, it could be persistence. I mean, target structure is a little bit of an abuse here because target structure should really be the return type. But it was a convenient.
So that's why I'm suggesting persistence location,
Yeah, local cloud.
because this has all the necessary things: local, shared, blah blah blah.
Yep. So the two instances that I've at least prototyped here that aren't in persistence location are notebook and print, which were the next
Notebook is
examples.
right here.
Oh, notebook is right there. Yep.
Print is a little different. I'm not sure what that really means. But what is the thing that what is the thing that persistence location is the right hand side of an option? Of which option? See what I'm saying?
I
Well, I don't know exactly here.
there's dollar persistent base.
No, persistence path, and then persistent objects refer to that persistence path. So I'm not completely sure how this. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, right. Yes, I think the whole point of persistence location was to create an object that you write to, and then, you can, right, and then persistent object is, I guess I think of it as sort of well, I guess I'm thinking of persistent symbol, right? But right, it's.
yes,
Right. You're basically associating values with something so that, right, it could be the session or kernel startup or the front end or whatever. But and I don't, yeah, I'm certainly not seeing, and I don't remember off the top of my head options that take. Right, so the persistent path has persistent locations in it. But
okay. One issue here is you want to extrude an Apache log file.
Yep.
How do you do it?
well, I think that's an export operation, right? Export,
But not for
log
begin
object.
logging. For begin logging, you just want to have that thing be accumulating.
I mean, my initial thought was log object of some file that is a log. You know, as long as the file format is explicit, we could read it in as part of the log object structure. You want to be able to export log objects to whatever logging format you want. It makes sense to potentially
With
be able to
begin
import
logging,
them.
you might be generating millions and millions of messages
Mm-hmm.
that are just going to an external file.
Yep.
Right.
And
So maybe that's the target structure, right? Target structure goes to Apache. Target structure goes to.
yes, that makes more sense.
Right. We'd need a.
Logging format goes to.
Yes. Sure. Right. I mean, we do have a dollar something location. Right. We have generated asset location, which maybe is what you were thinking
Yes,
of.
that's what I was thinking of.
Right. And that's the thing that's used by video creation and audio creation objects for where to create the anonymous guys.
Okay.
And has Right, and then generated asset location is the non-option, right? And the possible values for generated as asset location are, file objects, local objects, cloud objects, etc.
Okay, we got two things that seem to me to be important here. One is I just want to be extruding stuff to an Apache log file. I don't really want anything else to happen. I don't want it stored in memory. I just want that thing put in an external file. That's thing number one. Thing number
Yep.
two, this whole thing about tags and levels and so on.
For the first one, I think you would disable the whatever internal bag expr based log and turn on the
But
file
how?
based one.
How?
Well, I think you would need to
Call
give it a
log
log
object.
object. You'd need to give
Some-
it a log object, right? You'd need to give begin logging a log object that's, has generated asset location goes to file name and, logging format goes to Apache or something along those lines.
Or at least we can say begin logging. Okay, so we want, you could say begin logging, file blah, 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 .apache log. I don't know, does it have it's a .log file, right?
Right, but that can be any of, 37 different formats for appropriate values of 37.
Yes. So really this is something like Apache log goes to file.log or something. As opposed to just, the alternative would be begin logging of a log object which has a persistence location of that file, or which is just a purely local log object. Are we calling it log object or logging object? It might be better to call it logging.
It might be better just to avoid the name clashes with log, but
yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
I think logging object is fine and avoids silliness.
An example in chat.
Oh, activate as a sub-value to.
There's an active property. There's an activate method.
Yeah.
Is this related to the Wonder Twins?
This
is instead of saying begin logging and logging.
Instead of
saying,
begin, this is instead of begin
Horrible.
logging and end logging.
Horrible. So, okay, begin logging to an Apache log with that file name. Or, if you just say file.log, it would default to some file name, but format. Then the alternative would be begin logging to a persistence location.
I don't think most of the persistence locations make sense, right? Certainly session, kernel session, front end session. I suppose maybe notebook.
Okay, we have to figure this out, but it's also got to be able to be logged to a local object, etc.
Obviously, right, that's no different from a cloud object.
Perhaps logged to a data bin, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just one more thing, then we should wrap up for now. Logged could have tags, presumably.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I started to implement, and it's not super obvious whether the tags are going to be annotations to the log or they're going to be filters for another column. If it should be an indication of what.
Well, I think one obvious thing there should be an option for a log level.
Right, to say this is a debug log, this is a panic log, etc.
It seems to me that we should expect that everything's going to go into a tabular, and it can just be a particular column of the tabular.
I don't understand that statement.
I think there's two models, Right. There's the log everything that is this level of logging and higher, and anything that's below whatever log level I set just gets ignored. Or there is the tag everything with the appropriate log level and then filter afterwards, which I think is what Steven's proposing.
Okay, but you're saying with logging, and then we could say in with logging a level number,
Yeah.
min
Right.
level. That might be nice.
Right, and that should be everything and below, but
Yeah. Sorry.
but
Scaling
yes.
up versus down, but yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is it the level is more important if the number is bigger?
It's less important.
I'm not sure that's the right way around. It's like interrupt level.
Certainly in all Unix logging systems that I am familiar with, right? You know, like right, the more V's you add, the more stuff you see in your log, right?
Mhm.
Wait a sec. So you're saying level 1 is more important than level 7?
Correct.
Yeah, they correspond to priority levels.
Yeah.
But priority level is usually the other way around. Like
It's like DEF CON 1.
Yeah,
It's the same as Unix.
priority 1
Exactly.
bug.
I see, that's
versus
confusing.
priority
It
5.
used to be back in the day, maybe in the 70s, computers used to have priority levels where the higher the priority level, the more important it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose that
But
both.
of
If you want
course
to
that's
introduce
gone the way
something
of
more
the
important
times.
than level 1, you're in trouble.
Well, I know, but I remember computer that I used for a long time had a priority level 13, thing, which was the machine is on fire.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that in modern times,
I mean, I think
smaller the number.
I think the better thing to do is to define a hierarchy, and I mean maybe it's wrong, but I would assume that you would want to define a named hierarchy, right? This would be an ordinal, I guess is what we're
Yeah.
calling this,
Mhm.
and you know everything up to a certain point is logged, or whichever direction these.
Okay, so we have to think about how that works with ordinals.
Yep.
And also, I'm not sure, and we don't want it too heavyweight, because you really want to be able to say logged, x per comma 2 or something.
Yeah, I think there are going to be shortcuts for convenience. Ordinal's nice in that you could have an ordinal column in the tabular that says, these are all debug level things, and you know what the different categories are. But yeah, we want to be able to work with them conveniently too.
I think this is coming along well.
Yeah, I'll start mocking some of this up, and probably next time we'll be a little more hands-on with some of the.
I want to look at some of these connections.
Yep.
And whatever happened to monitor without monitor for map and so on? Is that in there?
Okay, so that's actually something I wanted to talk about, and was on the agenda for last week until the LCC meeting was canceled. So, Julio merged it to master. There are missing pieces. For example, none of the operator forms is implemented, and given the number of we've solved all of the issues that I'm aware of, or that we uncovered during the PR review process, but this hasn't been, I think, super heavily stressed. So it's in 15.1 builds of master now, but I'm not sure that this is something that we should rush into 15. Especially given that
No,
Julio.
I understand. I mean, how can I look at this?
So, yep. So if you map, right, and then pound, yeah. Yep.
That's beautiful. Boy, that's useful.
Right, and I mean, I can send you a notebook, or if you want me to briefly share, I can probably find the agenda where I have the list
Let's
of.
try and get this set up, but let's try and get a meeting set up soon. It will be really lovely to get this in.
Okay,
So can't do it right this second, but sometime in the next couple of days, hopefully.
okay, sounds good.
All right, good stuff. I'm excited to see this logging framework come together, and hopefully after that, more progress on the progress monitoring framework.
Okay,
Okay, see you guys soon.
Thanks all.
Bye.
bye.